Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Satyajit, as Adam told you, and I work at Callstack as a front-end developer. And I'm going to talk about React navigation today. My friend Michał Osadnik was supposed to give the talk with me, but he fell sick, so I'm the only person today. Okay, so you can follow me on Satya164 on Twitter if you want to stay updated. So first thing is I want to talk about navigation in browsers, and I want to compare it with how navigation works in React Native and how is it different. So what is this navigation? We can think of it as deriving the current screen. There is yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we can think of it as deriving the screen from a given state. In browsers, we have URL, which is the state of the current page. And from the URL, we determine which screen to show. For example, say we have a profile screen. When we go to the profile URL, we show this screen. But then when this URL changes, for example, to feed, we show a different screen altogether. So this is how the navigation in browser works. In browsers, there is an API called History API, which was part of HTML5, and it gives us different methods to manage history, the browser history on client side. It's mostly useful for single page apps. So it's similar in React Native. The basic concepts of navigation are very similar, but there are some important differences we need to talk about. So first of all, React Native is a framework for building native apps. So our navigation pattern need to be the same as the pattern used in native apps, otherwise it will not feel native. We cannot just get the navigation pattern of the web and use the same thing on React Native, because then it will feel like a web app, which we don't want. We want a good native experience. So probably one of the biggest differences between browsers and native apps is animation. Like on browsers, there is no page transition animation when you go to a different page. But in native apps, you can expect a smooth transition when you go to a different page. In the videos, on this side there is a browser, and on that side there is a native app. And you can see when you go to a new page on the browser, there is no animation. But on native app, there is an animation. So if you have used web, there are routers such as React Router. So React Router only tells you what is the current URL and what screen to render for that URL. It does not have any kind of UI. It only handles the logic for all routing that you have. It works well on the web because we don't have animations, as we talked about. But also on the web, all the websites have very different designs, right? So you cannot provide a single UI to match all of the use cases, because everyone will have different designs, and everyone will be asking, oh, how do I do this? And with a single UI, it will be very complex to have all these customizations. But in native apps is quite different, because on native apps we have certain native patterns. On iOS we have a same style of header in every app. On Android we have same style of header in every app, and we have same screen animation in every app. So in React Native we have it easy in terms of components, because we can use the same components in all of the apps and just customize few things about them. So this is one example of how the header works in iOS. As you can see, when there is a screen transition animation going on, there is a title called feed, and it is seamlessly changing into the back button. And even if we have this only one UI to implement, is a complex UI. Right? This animation is not that easy to implement. We have to measure every element and figure out how much we want to move it. Yeah, it's very complex. It's also possible to like navigate back using a gesture. For example, say you cannot see my finger here, but I'm moving the screen, and when I'm moving the screen with gesture, you can see the current screen is moving and the screen behind the screen is also moving. So it's quite a complex animation and involves a lot of moving parts. Also, another thing is all these animations are different between iOS and Android. iOS has this horizontal slide animation. On Android, there is a mostly vertical animation. There was a different animation in Android 6, which was like vertical fade animation. Then in Android 8, they introduced a new animation, which is a wipe kind of animation. And in the latest version of Android, they have a new animation which is like kind of scales up. So like all these platforms have different animations, and all the versions, like different versions of the same platform also has different animation. So there are a lot of different things we have to implement. And if you want to implement all of this yourself, it will be a lot of work. And again, since all of the apps need the same animations anyway, why not just build one library and use it everywhere, right? Yeah, so that's why like we are doing that in React Navigation. So we can talk about the history of navigation and how we came to React Navigation, right? When React Native was launched, there was not React Navigation. React Navigation was built like 2 years ago, and it was a community effort between Facebook and Expo and some other people from the community. So let's take a look at what are the navigators that was there before React Navigation. So first of all, when React Native was launched, it did not have Android support. It had only iOS support. And there was this navigator called Navigator iOS. It was like pure native navigator component, and it was only on iOS because there was no Android. It has like very smooth and performant transitions, but again, it did not have a lot of customizations. You could only change the color of the header, and I think that's all. There is nothing much. Unfortunately, this navigator is now deprecated and it is no longer in core. So then React Native added support for Android, and we needed a new navigator because we could not use Navigator iOS on Android. So the next one is Navigator. This Navigator component was written in like pure JavaScript, unlike Navigator iOS, which was native. So because this was JavaScript, it was possible to use the same code on both iOS and Android, and use the same Navigator component on both platforms. It also had a lot of more customization options. Since it is in JavaScript, it's usually much easier to add more customization options. So you could customize like what kind of transition animation you want, like the colors, of course, fonts, everything. But there was one major drawback of this component. It did not use the animated API that we now use for animations. The way it did animation is it was calling request animation frame and like driving the animations manually. So that was a problem because later down the line, React Native added support for use native driver, which offloaded these animations to native thread. And because this was not using the animated API, it cannot like take advantage of that. So the animation performance could be bad if your JavaScript thread is blocked. So next one, we have a new animation library. Since Navigator had all these limitations, like there was a rewrite of the navigation library called Navigation Experimenter. This was built by Eric Vicente, who used to work at Facebook at that time. So this was a like very low level navigation library. You just got some components which you could animate, but you had to manage the navigation state by yourself. So basically it was useful to build primitives based on this library and use those primitives in your apps, because like directly using this library in your app is it was very difficult. Yeah, so it was also the basis of the React navigation that came after, because it was built to be a like basic building block. Okay, so the next one, not long after, Wix launched a new navigation library called React Native Navigation. So it's still alive and like is still maintained. In React Native Navigation, the difference was, unlike the previous Navigation Experimental and Navigator libraries, it was implemented natively. So you had like fully native navigation. One major thing about this library is in React Native Navigation, all of the screens act like they're independent apps. Like you cannot have a same context at the root that you can share between all the apps. Each app is registered separately. Each screen is registered separately. Like there is a method register screen or something like that. I don't remember the name, but there is a separate method. You have to call for each screen and register them. Like in React Native apps, you call app registry.register component. So it's very similar. So yeah, so that was problem of React Native Navigation, that like it didn't really work in React way, and it was very imperative. So the next navigation library was X Navigation. This is a continuation of Navigation Experimental. It was basically based on Navigation Experimental, and it was built by Expo, basically by Brent Watney and Adam Miskiewicz. This was also like fully JavaScript based like previous navigators, but this was like one of the first navigation libraries which had a lot of different navigators. Like it had a stack navigator, it had a tab navigator, and it also had a drawer navigator. So you could implement a lot of different patterns with this library. So the next big navigation library was Native Navigation by Airbnb. The main motivation behind this library was to like make it usable in brownfield apps, like in the apps where you combine native screens with JavaScript screens. But now it's no longer maintained, so we can't use it. So by now we have had a lot of navigation libraries. Each had their own pros, own cons. Now it was time to like come up with a like community navigation library that meets most of the use cases that people need. So React Navigation was born, and it was a collaboration between Facebook, Eric Bischoff from Facebook, Expo, Brent Watney and Adam Miskiewicz, who worked on X Navigation, and also some community members such as me and Michał Grabowski. All of these people, we started this library. So it was like very customizable. We had a lot of different features that you could customize animation, you could customize everything. It was like very much like Navigation Experimental, but it had a like much simpler API. So now it is one of the most popular libraries. So we'll take a look at the like concepts and the problems it is trying to solve. In React Navigation, if you have ever used it, there is a concept called Navigator. A Navigator is a component that we use to manage our screens. So there are two important things a Navigator does for us. So first of all, it manages our page transition animations, such as also it manages our gestures. And second thing, it manages our state, navigation state, like which screen are we on currently, which screens are available, what is the history, how much can you go back, all of these things. So in React Navigation, this core logic of managing state is in a package called React Navigation Core. And to manage this state, we use a reducer pattern like in Redux. We don't use Redux, but like we use similar pattern. You dispatch actions, and that actions modifies that navigation state. So all this logic is in a package called React Navigation Routers. So then these navigators combine this router and core logic and add some native views on top of it, like stacks or tabs or drawer, and combined they are called navigators. So let's take a look at the various navigators we have in React Navigation and see what are the patterns they are implementing. So first of all, there is Stack Navigator. So we can think of our screens as like stack of cards. And to show a new screen, we add a new card to the stack. To go back, we remove that card from the stack. So this is one of the most common navigation patterns. You can see like the default animations for stack navigation on Android and iOS. So that is the iOS slide animation, and this is the Android 8 animation. Oh, sorry, Android 9, not 8. So the next one is tab navigation. This is another common patterns. Like we have a top tab bar and we have gesture to slide between them. And this is a pattern called bottom navigation, which is pretty new in Metal design. We have a bottom tab bar and we have like different icons with labels, and they animate when we switch between the screens. So iOS also has its own tabs pattern, which is very similar to the bottom navigation patterns, but it does not have any animations, and the guidelines are a bit different regarding the spacing and all those things. And next one is drawer navigation. We have a drawer sidebar on the left or right, and we have some list of screens to go to. So in React navigation, we have all these navigators, and we have like a lot of customization that you can do. But even if we have so many features and so many customizations in React navigation, it also has a lot of limitations in the current version. So I will like go through all these limitations and see like what are the problems we have. So first of all, there is static configuration. So in this current API, to define our navigators, we call this method called create tab navigator or create stack navigator or drawer navigator, and we pass it a list of screens. And then we pass any other configuration for the navigators, such as the initial root name or any other styles or animations, etc. So the problem with this approach is that this code is defined outside of render function or wherever component runs. So you don't have access to props, state, or context. So you cannot change anything dynamically here. And also it means that you cannot add new screens or remove new screens from this configuration because it's done outside render. So this is also another stack navigator definition. We also have something called navigation options. This was also a static property on the screen or a static object here. So you could not even change the title of the screen dynamically based on some state. So we realized that this is not good. We can't do it. So we took this static API and we changed it to dynamic. Yeah, so we have rewritten React navigation from scratch. We have kept the same concepts like nesting navigators, and we have the same options and all, but we have changed the API to define the navigator. React Navigation 5 introduces a completely new API, and this API is completely dynamic and inside render. Let's take a look. So first of all, you create a navigator like previous, but you don't pass anything. It's just simple function which creates a navigator. Then you can use this navigator inside your function component or class component. So here you have a navigator, you pass some props instead of a static config, then you have some screens that you define inside the navigator as children. And you have name of the screen that you can say navigation.navigator push, name of the screen, and you have the component which it should render. Then we also can specify titles like this. We just pass options prop, and in the prop we pass title or any other screen specific options. So the important difference here, since this is happening inside render, you have access to props, state, context, and you can fully change the configuration at any time dynamically. For example, say you want to change which screen is visible when the navigator starts. Previously, you could not like set initial root name based on a prop, but now we can do that. Now we can dynamically change it. So similarly, if you want to fetch some data from server, say you have a list of screens that you want to fetch and you want to render a list of screens, you can do that because it's just like same syntax as like rendering a list in React Native. Just like map on the data and render the different screens. And this list of screens can change at any time. So this also allows for some new tricks. You can also conditionally define screens. Say if the user is logged in, you have this feed screen or account screen. If the user is not logged in, you show the login screen or sign up screen. So you just define this and React Navigation will take care of it automatically. When is logged in changes from false to true, it will automatically remove all these screens which are not supposed to be there, and you'll see the feed screen. So in previous version, you had to like do a navigate manually, or you had to use something called switch navigator, or you had to do a reset. So now you have to no longer do all of those. It's all easy and automatic. And now we also have a new API for setting options. So if you want to change options dynamically, you just call navigation.setOptions and you can pass anything here. And you can call it from inside the component. So since you are calling it from inside the component, you have access to component state and component props, and you can use that here. So also we decided that we'll export a lot of hook-based API because like hooks are cool, and also they make our code much easier to maintain. Like this was a full rewrite, this version, and from the beginning we decided to use hooks, and it simplified our code a lot. So yeah, we also have like a lot of hooks exported for users to use. You can use navigation hook to access the navigation prop. You can use isFocus to know the status of the screen, if it is focused or not. So there are a lot of these hooks. You can check in the documentation. We have rewritten the library from scratch with TypeScript, and since we have rewritten it with TypeScript, we have like first-class TypeScript support. For example, in this GIF, you can see like you get auto-completion for all of the like params. You get auto-completion for the methods in the navigation object, and you also get auto-completion for the screens you can navigate to. Okay. It's cool. Yeah, so we also have like descriptions for each method. You can see that there is a JSDoc description. We have JSDoc for every method, so you have like kind of documentation in your editor. So recently we also added some native integrations. Like traditionally React Navigation was JavaScript only, but now we have like JavaScript paths and native paths which you can use like combine and use like you need. So first of all, there is this Navigator called Native Stack. It is based on a library called React Native Screens, which is maintained by Christoph Magera from Software Dimension. So this navigator is based on like fully native navigation primitives like Wix Navigator is. And on Android it uses fragments, on iOS it uses UI navigation controller. All of these animations and gestures are fully native. It's not re-implemented in JavaScript like before. The disadvantage of this is it's not very customizable. You cannot change a lot of things, but that's what the trade-off is. You either like get a lot of customization or you get more performance. So you can choose what you need. So next thing is we also have similar backends for tabs. So for our material top tabs, we have a backend based on Vue Pager Android component, which was recently extracted from React Native Core, and it is now maintained by Ferran and Trotsky from CoStack. And there is a backend called, how is it called? Yeah, React Native Tab Vue Pager Adapter. It's a very long name. It's maintained by Software Dimension. Yeah, so you can also do crazy things like this with this backend, like page call transition. Next thing is we have added integration with Redux DevTools extension. Like you can see all of the navigation actions in Redux DevTools. So we are not using Redux, but Redux DevTools API provides us a way to show these actions. You can see the current navigation state. It also supports time travel debugging, so you can just drag it and go back in some previous navigation state. So it works really nice, and you don't have to write a single line of code to enable it. If you use Redux DevTools extension or you use React Native Debugger app, then it will work automatically. You don't have to change anything. So you can use this new version of React Navigation from today. You just go to reactnavigation.org, and we just released it today, stable version for you. And so yeah. So you can go to this URL and follow the getting started guide to install it. We also have an upgrading guide, like where we list all of the changes that happened because it's a completely new API. So if you are coming from the old version of React Navigation, you will want to go through this to get familiar with what changed. And if you are using React Navigation 4 in your apps, don't worry, it will be maintained for a while, and we'll provide bug fixes and merge pull requests or help like keep it compatible with latest React Native. But if you are using older version than React Navigation 4, I would highly recommend you to upgrade to React Navigation 4 because the versions below it won't be supported. It's pretty easy to upgrade from React Navigation 3 to React Navigation 4. You just have to change some import statements. There is no breaking change. So yeah, so just upgrade your apps to React Navigation 4 if you want to like stay on the current supported versions. Yeah, so that's all. If you have any questions, you can catch me after the meetup. Yeah, thank you and have a nice evening.